Hey, and welcome to the College Basketball Road to Madness show. The week is in the books. It was an interesting week. Not a lot of tight games, but some very interesting games, and we'll get into probably the biggest story of the college basketball week. Chris Mack out at Louisville.
Yep.
You were just talking about him earlier in the week and how much you trusted Louisville, and we're ready to take them versus UVA, and the next thing you know, the coach is being fired mid-season. I was a little stunned they pulled the trigger here mid-season and got rid of him.
Yeah.
I mean, Louisville hasn't had a great season, but I mean, by no means is it sitting at the bottom of the ACC. They're middle tier, pretty much with a collection of about 20 other teams here. So
the rest of the conference?
Yes. In his first couple of years there, I thought he was pretty successful as a coach. Last year, it was an okay season. I sort of scratched last year away. This year, it did appear to be going. I think the Dino Gaudio thing probably played a lot more into this situation than overall anything else. The true story: don't hire a man who could not win college basketball games with Chris Paul on his roster, I think would be the overall tone of this. But were you a little shocked at the Chris Mack firing midway through the season? That's two coaches now gone halfway through the season, with Turgeon gone over at Maryland as well.
Yeah, I don't know how much Louisville gains here unless they just think they can go out and make the big play hire, big splash hire. I saw Auburn is already restructuring Bruce Pearl's contract, make sure they lock him down. So I guess they just wanted to be, near the front of the line as far as, getting their pick. They have the boosters with their program, but, you look at Louisville now, you're getting close to, a decade and a half. I guess
Yes.
they got that one with Pitino.
With
about
Pitino, but
10,
all the
ago,
fallout out of that Pitino, and
Yeah.
then you have the fallout with the Chris Mack, Dino Gaudio situation.
Yeah.
I think that was going to be my next question to you. Louisville, probably not a blue blood program that you'd put in there with the Duke, Kansas, Carolina, but I think definitely probably that second tier of college basketball program that you think of when you think of college basketball.
Yeah.
But is it still, you think, one of those elite schools that, maybe a big-time coach at a program that's like hovering right on the mid-tier would leave his situation to go? You spoke of Bruce Pearl getting restructured. Would a Bruce Pearl, who's built that Auburn program into a pretty decent program, leave that to go to a situation in Louisville, which is, I think, sort of dropped downhill for a while now?
Well, see, here's the thing. I think Louisville thinks much higher of themselves than I think many of the top coaches in the country are thinking of Louisville. I think there's better opportunities out there that are coming, and I just don't know if, like we said, it's been a while and they've had some ugly stuff. I don't know if recruits look at Louisville as this big time program. So obviously, I think with the midseason hire, they think they can go and get the big name, but I don't know if they'll be able to or not. I guess we'll see who else gets
I think a lot of people will leverage it to get contract extensions for sure. But even I will say 4 or 5 years ago when Mack left, I was a little stunned. He left Xavier to go to Louisville. I mean, it's definitely an upgrade in situation, but I don't know how much of an upgrade. I regard Louisville as a definite year in and year out tournament team. Maybe not quite a national champions contender, but I would never be shocked if Xavier made a run to the Final Four. They haven't done that, but they've had teams that are definitely good enough to make that run to the Final Four. So I was a little stunned when he made that move. We'll see if he can find another job. I'm assuming somebody else will probably find a place for Chris Mack, who has a pretty decent resume despite the last couple of years at Louisville.
I don't know how much of a hurry he'll get in, though, because he's getting quite the buyout
yes.
from Louisville. I think every month he doesn't work, he's getting like 100, 200 grand, something like that. I'd take that to not do anything.
Yes, definitely, definitely so. But coaches, they get a little twingy. They can probably last a year, and then the bug sort of tends to hit them a little bit. But definitely interesting at Louisville. Fun timing, of course, as you still had trust in them, and then 3 days later, buyouts coming.
I really thought they were gonna, turn things around and you know, kind of hang near that middle to top and kind of build their way back up. And then that just ugly loss. They got it kind of close at the end with that Virginia, but they were really dominating that whole game.
They were
and that is not a good Virginia team either. They're kind of in the same situation, if not worse, because they don't quite have the history that Louisville does. But yeah, just continuous, you know, bad performance after bad performance. I think they've lost 5 of their last 7. So not great. Not
great at all. So we'll see how that goes. I will say, you know, Maryland has seemed to have found its footing, so maybe Louisville can find its footing. I do think there's at least enough talent there to make a little bit of a push here, maybe make that push to get into the NCAA tournament. I'm curious to see how the NCAA tournament sort of deals with teams like Louisville. Do they grab, you know, maybe an 18 and 12 team, or do they go, you know, up and maybe grab an extra one of the, I will get into a couple of those Mountain West teams that are probably, you know, 24, 25 wins, but might not have the big super win there. So.
Well, I think this is an interesting year. You know, we've got a lot of postponements and cancellations of games, but I think there's a lot of more, I think there's better basketball with the lower, smaller conferences this year than there necessarily is in years past, and I think there's a lot of pretenders in the bigger conferences this year as well that are playing below their talent level. So it'd be interesting to see what the committee does and how much credit they give some of these teams with COVID issues and such. You know, they may just go for television ratings and get all the blue bloods, the traditional teams in there, just so people are like, who is this team playing? You know,
maybe not a lot of love for our Wyoming Cowboys out there or something. You know, you said it. I mean, just looking at the weekend games, I was definitely a lot more interested in a couple of those lower tier conference games with matchups than I was. There were a bunch of matchups with just sort of middle of the pack teams that I was like, why do I care? You know, one is going to win, one's going to lose, and then the next week 2 more are going to play each other, and it could be a totally reversed result. I mean, you saw it, I think, a little bit with Virginia Tech this week. I think people thought they were sort of starting to find their rhythm, and then they have a terrible week this week, and it's just sort of, you know, every time you trust a team, we'll get into Carolina too. I think we were off them, and now they've had a 2-0 week, and we're like, can they make the jump here? And so it's just a lot of sort of, I'd say, mediocre play in those high-level conference for those middle-tier teams. Now, you know, the high-tier teams, I think they're really, really good teams there, but I just, that middle of the pack, it's sort of like, you have no clue one day or the other. We'll get into it. We were both high on Florida State and somehow go to Georgia Tech and lose to that Georgia Tech team. So let's get into our recap of the week. We're going to go through the conferences here. The VCU Davidson game, we mentioned it on Monday. I was curious if VCU could sort of get their season back on track with a nice win versus Davidson. They went in there, got a big win there, and I think this is where we're going to talk about, can like a VCU get in there with a couple more wins? Could a Davidson even scratch in there if they happen not to lose in the, you know, their conference tournament? I think the A-10, probably a little bit deeper conference than people think. St. Bonaventure's isn't helping me much. We'll get to them now. But nonetheless, a good win for VCU here in that game.
Yeah, and, you know, we were just talking about, you know, tournament, and when these guys, you know, these are guys we've seen in the tournament quite frequently, and they're starting to play better basketball. But, yeah, good win for VCU. I was starting to really get on this Davidson train, and so just, you know, really good to go in there and get that road victory. But I think you can still put these kind of teams, not a whole lot of separation. It was a close game. You could play that game 10 times, and you could split it down the middle. But it's like you said, there may need to be 1 or 2 of these that get some separation. I think if they keep splitting these matchups, we may not see anybody but the automatic qualifier in the tournament. So they may be hurting themselves. But good basketball. Don't count Davidson out just yet. They had just managed to eke into the top 25. They'll probably fall out now, but they could get back in there.
Yeah, definitely. So I watched a good portion of this game, and I thought this was the first one that Davidson sort of fell back to their style the last couple of years, where their defense wasn't quite as good. I mean, they're never going to be, locked down defensively, but they seem to give VCU a couple too many easy shots. Their offense, as always, was pretty efficient. Their offense is always going to be pretty efficient, but it was one of those where their defense didn't help their offense at all, and VCU was able to go in there, get a good win, 5-2 now in the A-10. So I'm looking for them to make a little bit of a run. We'll talk about the other team in the A-10. I want to talk about, you sent me a text about the St. Bonner-George Mason game. You were like, is George Mason any good? I was like, they're okay. Been good at home, struggle on the road. And St. Bonaventure's, I've been like, has not been a good road team. I'd stay away from it. Turned out to be true. St. Bonaventure's once again goes on the road, loses a tough one to George Mason. I wouldn't even say it was like a close game where they let down. They just got beat pretty good, outplayed. I think there were a lot of high expectation for the St. Bonaventure's team. It hasn't quite lived up to it. I wouldn't call anything a terrible loss here, maybe Northern Iowa, but it's a solid Northern Iowa team. But, losses to Connecticut and Virginia Tech, two teams who will probably be battling for, one of those final tournament spots. Same with Dayton. George Mason probably not quite in that range, but still a solid team. And it seems like every time they've stepped up on the road to a solid team, they haven't been quite able to live up to their expectation. Disappointed with St. Bonaventure, so you think, maybe they'll find their rhythm here.
Yeah, I had them, when we did our seeding, I had them kind of right there on the edge, and this was not a great loss here. Like you said, George Mason pretty much controlled this from the get-go. Yeah. I was shocked. I pulled up the odds on Wednesday. Yes. I was looking at it, and I was like, only 2-point favorites at George Mason. I think the St. Bonaventure team is much better than George Mason, but really struggled on the road, and so I think if they're going to want to get into that tournament play and get a good seed, they're going to have to do something impressive, and they're going to run out of opportunities on their schedule to do so. Yeah.
You mentioned it. They got 4 games coming up here. St. Joe's and Fordham, those are like, you must win those, can't lose. But really, I think to make a push back into where we thought they were going to be at the beginning of the season, I was really high on them at the beginning of the season. I think I was ready to buy their jersey and wear it around. But Davidson and Richmond. Yeah. Davidson comes to them. I think that's a must-win. You got to win those home games versus the other teams we think are the elite teams in the A-10. And then Richmond, who's, it's a good basketball team. It's not quite, into that level that is at the top of the A-10, but they definitely could come back and bite you. And it wouldn't be something where, we're doing our conference tournaments and we're looking at long shots and we see Richmond on the board there. It wouldn't be like out of the realm that they make a run. So I think they have to have that road win in Richmond, much the same as George Mason. You got to be able to go in there and beat those sort of middle tier teams on the road to sort of show that you can play at an NCAA tournament level. So we'll see if St. Bonaventure's can get back on track here. We'll move to the ACC. We'll start out with your Florida State Georgia Tech game here. I think we both have to eat a little crow because we were really, really high coming in on the week, thinking this Florida State team might make the jump to get on top of the ACC here. It was Miami who made the jump to get on top of the ACC there, but just going to Florida State. I know it was a 2-game week, short, rest, but for a team with Florida State's level of players, that shouldn't really factor, and it's not even like they're going into a crappy gym like we saw with Delaware Townsend earlier, where I guess moisture was on the floor. I think Georgia Tech's gym was quite all right and conducive for this type of team, so disappointing loss here for Florida State.
Yeah, this is a very bad, barely 500 Georgia Tech team, and I was really disappointed because I went out on a limb, claimed Florida State is the best team in the ACC, even putting them over Duke. They've got another matchup with Duke coming up here in the next week or so. So we'll see how that goes. But just, just a really bad Georgia Tech team. And I had Florida State in my daily picks minus the 5.5, and they lost by 14. So we continue to wait for that team in the ACC to really dominate. Yeah, Duke's there, but really Duke hasn't been that impressive this season.
Honestly, Miami has probably been in conference play has been the most impressive team so far, even after losing to Florida State.
Yeah,
over the weekend.
Just looking for some more consistency offensively, especially from Florida State, and you can see that in the game. Kept subbing in players, just trying to find that lineup that's going to gel. I think a lot of teams were really dealing with this across the country, but still a long season to go. A lot of conference games, and like we said, there's a lot of clumps in that ACC conference for teams to stand out and make some moves. So just a really bad road outing for Florida State, and taking them, I should have looked at the back-to-back games there. That I think they struggled with that, and not to mention that was a hard-fought battle against that Miami team.
Yeah, I think you saw that in a couple games this week when teams got the big win, or they had 2 games on their schedule. There was one game that always seemed to be a little bit of a letdown game, and one game they seem to get up for. We'll get to that in the Big Ten, the Illinois Michigan State game. They really got up for that game after that terrible loss over the weekend there. But yeah, just disappointing. I think the one team in the ACC that we can say is not a contender is probably Georgia Tech.
Yeah.
I think from that level up, I think everybody's a little bit in play here. So yeah, to go there and lose, granted conference road game, but you shouldn't have a problem with Georgia Tech this year at all. Next up, you go to Carolina. Came off a bad week. I think we were both a little down on them, losing to Miami and Wake Forest. Then come into this week, beat a Virginia Tech team who had gotten some momentum going, and then doing the thing I think they hadn't done all year. Not a great Boston College team, but Boston College got control of the pace of that game, and Carolina won a game 58-47. I think that's probably one of the first times they barely had a game under 100 points all season long here. Yeah. So I think I was more impressive, though it was a worse team, that Boston College, but they were able to win a game and win it at least commandingly in a game that is a low scoring where they don't control the pace and they have to defend a little bit.
Yeah, their offense has been, when they come out, it ends up being like a shootout. And when their offense is clicking, it's one of the best in the country. But it was nice to see their defense play a little bit better. They still got to work on getting their turnover percentage down and just a lot of unforced turnovers. Just they definitely look like a young, talented team. Like I said, they can make the flashy plays. They can get the scoring, but just better team basketball, defensive basketball. So, albeit a low-scoring game against Boston College, it was impressive to see them get that kind of just control the ball victory.
Which we haven't had many of this year for North Carolina.
So maybe they've turned a corner. We'll see how they finish out this season. Like I said, talent-wise, they're capable, but just got to play smarter basketball.
Yeah, I think so. That's what I'm really curious. I think I look at the teams in the ACC and I look talent-wise. Mm-hmm. I think Duke, Carolina, and probably Miami, though they don't have the depth, but the 5 that they can put out there probably are the teams that have the 5 most talented players on it. Duke's been relatively consistent, but I don't think impressive. Miami has sort of been really, really solid this whole conference season. They got off to a bit of a slow start, but you just don't know, they're one injury away or one, COVID from inflicting the team of a 2-week, just dropping real quick. And then this Tar Heel team, who it just seems like a little bit, I think, like Tennessee, where they every time they seem to have stepped up versus upper competition, they haven't been able to show they can get that win. Tennessee last week showed they could at least step up, beat LSU. That hasn't quite come yet for North Carolina. Purdue, Tennessee, Kentucky, Notre Dame, Miami, Wake Forest are their losses. All teams that are probably right now rated better than them. They haven't been able to step up for a win. So I'm curious, going into this stretch, NC State and Louisville, they should be able to win those 2 games, and that should take them into a 4-game, winning streak going into the big showdown rivalry with Duke there. So that should be really, really interesting to see if North Carolina maybe can find themselves here and come together.
And it's like you said, it's lining up for a really good opportunity for them because they've got some easier matchups and then a home matchup with Duke. So if they can get that big win and get some momentum, they could really climb back up into the top tier basketball teams in the country.
Yes, definitely so. All right, let's move on to the AAC and a couple things going on here. Temple bounced back with being out for about 3 weeks here with a good win at home versus Cincinnati. I just... right before they got hit with this COVID situation, I thought this Temple team was starting to play really, really good basketball. They had a tight loss to Houston, and then they went on the 3-game winning streak with UCF, East Carolina, and Tulsa. I know those are, elite tier teams, but they're the middle of the pack of the American Athletic Conference. And then they played Cincinnati all for 3 weeks, and I thought getting a nice win versus Cincinnati they're at home. I'm curious where you judge Temple. We'll get into the game versus SMU a little bit later in the program because I think that's a sort of a big, tipping scale there with Houston and probably SMU. Definitely on a, a pedestal up here, and then you probably have the rest of the AAC. But what are you looking at here with Temple going forward here?
Well, I'm really looking forward to their final. It's way later in the season, but I really like this Houston team. And I want to see what Temple can do against Houston the next time they play because it was a pretty close game the last time. Temple, good defensively, got to get better on the offensive side, especially in their shot percentage. So, it's like you said, I think those 3 teams are going to be battling for that one top position. So we'll see what they do. They get Memphis a little bit later, too, so that's another good opportunity. But
we're about to get into them, so...
Temple still a lot to prove to me.
Yes.
I don't think they're quite up there with Houston just yet, but they played them pretty decently the last time, so that's the one I've got circled on my calendar for Temple.
Well, I'm keeping my eye on it, certainly on the game this weekend, to see if they can sort of climb into that pack with those other 2 and sort of separate themselves from that. It's a pretty jumbled middle tier there in the AAC. I don't know right now if more than 2 would get in from the AAC. We'll see. Maybe a Cincinnati climbs in there, but it's pretty jumbled in there right now. Maybe a UCF, but they've sort of struggled of late. Let's flip things over to a team I don't think either of us thought were going to be on the really, really far end down there where we don't even know if they're going to make the tournament here.
Definitely.
They came off the 3-game losing streak, Central Florida, East Carolina, SMU. Penny went on his little rant there, and they bounced back, I will say. 2 wins in a row, Tulsa and East Carolina. Not the elite of the elite, but if you look at East Carolina, they played a lot of teams tough. That was probably actually one of the best games I think I've seen Memphis play. 'Cause I watched a lot of that game just because I thought I wanted to see if this Memphis team is going to finally turn the corner here. What do you make of it? Are they going to gel here and start sort of, I don't want to say potential, but at least make a run to get into the tournament here?
I don't think so. I think they're still dealing with too many injury situations there. I'm kind of holding my breath after this East Carolina win because I think a lot of it was it was a big-time revenge game for this Memphis because the loss against East Carolina was when they had the Penny rant, just ugly loss, and I almost wanted to make a bet on East Carolina, but I thought that I was like, Memphis is going to be out to at least save face a little bit, get the split. They did that, but I don't know how they're going to perform against the Cincinnati in this next game they've got coming up next week. Just the depth and inexperience on this team are 2 major issues. I think the injuries are the biggest thing, and just Penny's lack of composure and leadership through this is not going to help them. So I'm not a believer in Memphis, and I think things could get worse. We'll see if Penny even survives the year.
Yeah, it's huge, these next 3 games, because we talked about it with North Carolina, Cincinnati, UCF, Tulane. 2 sort of middle-tier AAC teams that you'd think they'd be in and around on the level, and then a poor Tulane team that, if they can go those 3 wins, that put them at 14-8, going into then a stretch where it's Houston, SMU, and then the aforementioned Temple team we talked about. Temple team we don't know yet. We're going to have to wait and see how they progress certainly through the, next 2 weeks before they step up and play that Memphis game. But that Houston SMU stretch there, I don't know if you can sort of actively go in there saying we're definitely winning those two games, especially with if you watch the SMU game, I think it was over the weekend. SMU just dominated them, and it looked like SMU was a much better team. Mm-hmm. So they have to have that Cincinnati, UCF, Tulane. They're then 14-8. I think they could probably survive, maybe a Houston SMU loss, and then to close out Temple, Wichita State, South Florida. I don't think they have a ton of room here to sort of lose, in between games. They got to sort of cruise out, win every game that's in that middle tier, and they could probably be okay. I don't know if they're on the level to be able to handle, the Temples, the Cincinnatis, like that. Wichita State is a complete wild card because they started out hot, then were completely inept going into conference play, and then they've looked a little bit better of late. So there's no telling at the end of the year what you're getting with that Wichita State team. But I think this next little stretch here, I think you have to have that Cincinnati, UCF, Tulane 3-0. You have to go on that stretch there for them.
Yeah, definitely. I think they're going to have to win the games that they're supposed to win, and I think they're going to need some upsets too. I think they're going to need at least a split with Houston to really prove something to somebody.
That one I don't know if you maybe could convince me into the SMU win, though. They did not look good.
No.
Versus SMU, and that was SMU going into the pyramid there, which it's not often you go in there and get dominated in the pyramid. So I don't know if they can even in remotely the same class as that Houston team and spring an upset. Now, granted, that Houston game is the last game of the season, so there's no telling, Houston probably won't need it all that much, and we'll see how serious they take the AAC's tournament as well. But they might be shooting for a 1 seed too, so it's really hard to judge that game so far ahead. All right, let's get into the Big 12. The Kansas-Texas Tech game was a really, really entertaining game. I didn't put it on the list because it just sort of an overtime game. I don't think our thoughts go any one way on Texas Tech losing an overtime game or Kansas winning an overtime game. On that one, I think we both have those teams pretty much judged as really, really good, solid basketball teams there. So I sort of skipped that one. The two I was looking at this week were Iowa State, Oklahoma, West Virginia. Iowa State went down there, I think got really, really an important win, especially after the sort of bad 2-week stretch they were on. I think that was a must win for Iowa State. You don't want to go must win this probably early, but I didn't think they could go that far down in the Big 12 conference at this point with that many losses. Even if they were losses to the the top tier teams, I thought they had to have that one. The Oklahoma West Virginia game, I just thought was sort of a sorted out game.
Yeah.
How much do we regard Oklahoma? How much do we regard West Virginia? Because I think they're sort of more on that bottom half of the good teams in the Big 12 that we sort of look at. And Oklahoma went in there, got the win. Little bit disappointed here in West Virginia. We'll get to it on the weekend's games, but I think that weekend game versus another team we're going to get into is really, really big here. But what did you take away from the Iowa State, Oklahoma State, and Oklahoma West Virginia game?
Well, it's like you said. I think all four of these teams going into those matchups, you could kind of almost group in a clump together. So these were really two big separation matchups, and I thought Iowa State and Oklahoma State. I think the winner of that kind of comes out with a little bit of an edge, and out of the four, West Virginia was probably closer to the bottom. But they had that home game with an opportunity to come out against Oklahoma. They couldn't quite do it. I thought Iowa State needed that bounce back after the loss to TCU, who's actually a surprising team I've been keeping an eye on. But I talked up Iowa State. They needed this win, and they went in and got it. So I think Iowa State and Oklahoma really kind of separated themselves and put them up a tier above those two guys.
All right. Really important win for Iowa State. I think you said that group of four is probably after, you look at, Kansas, Texas Tech, and then TCU probably falls somewhere, in that mix. And then you have those four And I think we sort of saw a separation there between Iowa State and Oklahoma, and then you get that next level of, Oklahoma State, West Virginia there. So I thought those were important games, and West Virginia has another important one coming up this weekend from another struggling one. We're going to go to the Big East, and we're going to go to another struggling team. Seton Hall got off to a blitzing start on the year, and it has it is not. The blitz has no longer worked here. Basically, starting about 2 weeks ago, they are on a 4 out of 5 losing streak, and we aren't talking about the elite of the Big East here. It's not, Providence, Villanova, which they lost to earlier in the year. It's DePaul, Marquette. You could probably throw in there, though. Technically, that was when Marquette was on a down stretch. That win sort of started their up stretch again. They beat St. John's, but then they come right back around and lose a home game to St. John's and
a home game
to Marquette here. So got swept by Marquette on away and home. Did go into St. John's, get a away win, but it's not looking good here for this Seton Hall team. Really disappointing because much like St. Bonaventure's, I had a lot of hopes for them as well.
Yeah, I really want to like the Seton Hall team, and they keep letting me down because when I'm looking at rankings, I look at are they good on the offense? Are they good on the defensive side of the ball? Is there a balance? Are they really good at one? And this team really balances both the offensive and defensive side of the ball. Top 100 in efficiency on both of those. But to drop, like you said, 4 out of their last 5, 6 out of their last 9 games. But losses to Providence, Villanova to be expected. Just to lose that home game to St. John's, and they really needed to bounce back and get this win against Marquette. I actually like this Marquette team too. We can talk about that in a little bit, but they're going to get back into some more games. They're going to play Xavier, they're going to play Villanova and UConn in some games that they're going to have to pull off some big time upsets, or they're just going to.
I was going to get into that. They play Georgetown, next coming up on Tuesday. We assume that's going to be a win, and then it's Creighton, Xavier, Villanova, Connecticut. I mean, that could easily
the way
be
they're playing.
Yeah.
So they're looking at either they're going to have to get some upsets, or they're going to get pulled back to 500 record and not even being any kind of contention for anything.
Yeah, and then it's try to make your name here in the conference tournament, and this one's always a deep and hard conference tournament to sort of work your way through. So I don't even know if you could sort of count on that. Just really disappointing. I think I okay with the Marquette loss at St. John's. I get it. It was back-to-back. But if you go in there and win in St. John's, how do you not bounce back and win at home? Granted, they're in the sort of same area. So maybe it's not a good St. John's team. Yeah. You should be able, if you're an elite team, you should be able to beat that team back-to-back, especially if you go into their house and win. The Marquette, you mentioned it. They've, caught fire once again. Pretty solid team, though. You'd think coming off a loss to that Marquette team just a week prior, you could defend your home court and get that win, and that's something you do. The other team I wanted to talk about here in the Big East, they're coming off a nice win this week versus Creighton. Was Butler. They've been really, really disappointing, coming off a really bad stretch here. But I think coming into the season, everybody thought this was going to be a really good Butler team. They were a pretty good team last year. Essentially, they have like 5 6-year guys on this roster. It's basically the exact same team, but older, that they've had the previous, 2 years. I don't know what's gone wrong, but I thought that was a good win versus Creighton. Granted, it's at home. Can this Butler team sort of find themselves and get going in the Big East here, or do you think this is a bit of a lost cause? I'm really shocked they're as poor as they were this year.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to have enough to turn this thing around. You look, they're non-conference. They had a really tough schedule. Couldn't quite take advantage of getting any wins there. And then they go into conference play and another really tough schedule. And I just look down at the rest of their season, and I don't see many wins left. They're 500 now. They're 10-10. I don't think they can finish with above 500 record. So unless they just go on some conference tournament hot streak, this could be the end of Butler for this season.
Yeah, it was a good win versus Creighton. Granted, home. It will be interesting to see if they can go to Creighton and get that win. Really to turn it around, that's what they're going to have to do. They're going to have to beat the Creightons, the Marquettes, the Xaviers, a couple times to see if they can get a flow. I don't know if they can do that. I don't even know what's really wrong with them because I mentioned it's basically the same team that they've had for the last 3 years or so. A lot of veteran players. It just hasn't seemed to be able to find their chemistry here. Didn't know if you thought they'd sort of maybe find their way here the last half of the stretch going forward. Maybe that Creighton win kicks them off. I don't know. But the big game during the week was Providence Xavier. I think we think these are probably the two best teams in the conference. Maybe Marquette's in there, but next thing you know, Marquette might be losing to DePaul and Georgetown in a back-to-back session. So I think these are the two most consistent teams. And Providence went in there and beat up on Xavier pretty good. How impressed are you with this Providence team here?
Yeah, I love me some of the Friars basketball. I think they're playing really good basketball. I saw that pick, I guess it was Wednesday night?
Yes.
Wednesday night, and they were getting 8.5 going to Xavier. I was all over that. Wish I'd taken the money line upset because I kind of saw it coming, and they dominated this game from the tip. Really like this Providence team. I think they're going to be moving up this top 25 pretty quick.
Yeah, I think so. I've liked them pretty much sort of throughout here, and I hit on them early in the conference schedule versus a couple ones there, Connecticut and Seton Hall, because I thought they were a little bit better than people let on, and that's sort of held true. I think probably what threw people off was that tough loss versus Virginia, early in the year. But we've all been stuck in the python of boring Virginia play, and I think that's sort of what caught them. They had a nice win versus Wisconsin on the season, a really good win versus Texas Tech. The Rhode Island win isn't great, but it's still a pretty solid win on the season. Vermont, we probably will get into, beat up on Stony Brook, so they're going to easily probably be the tournament team out of the American East. So, I thought they had better wins than people thought. And, and it just sort of proved out here going into Xavier and getting a win, which is always a difficult place to go in. And pretty much control this game, I thought.
Yeah, I'm really excited. A couple matchups with Villanova later in the year. Providence has the potential with their schedule, if they continue playing hot like they are now, of climbing into the 2, 3, 4 seed area, which is huge for this Providence basketball team.
Yeah, definitely so. All right, let's move on to the Big Ten. A couple things I wanted to get into. We're going to get into the Michigan State-Illinois game. Illinois coming off that really poor loss, and I think you were a little bit sitting on Michigan State here. I was a little bit more on Illinois because I think they probably have the better overall talent, and they seem to step up in the bigger games a little better. And they did. Well, they did for 3/4 of the game, and then tried to melt down. But what did you make of this Michigan State-Illinois game?
Yeah, I was really, thought this game was over early. I had Michigan State plus 4.5 going into this, and I thought Michigan State was going to come out and really prove that they were the better team here. They did not. Now, I will say Illinois, I think, is a much different basketball team at home. Yes. I think in their dome there, they play really good basketball, but just Michigan State, give them credit for clawing back. But one thing I watched is their offense. They just can't find any kind of rhythm or consistency. It seemed like they were just struggling to get baskets every time they had the ball. Illinois was hitting their shots. Luckily, they kind of went on about a 10-minute stretch there at the end where they couldn't score, let Michigan State back into the game. I got my cover. But just need to see Illinois with a little bit more consistency moving through. They did lose that game to Purdue. We'll see if they can climb back towards the top of the Big Ten.
Yeah, I think that's probably where I put Illinois a nudge ahead of Michigan State, is even if, the offense gets bogged down, they have a couple guys who can make shots. Yeah. And I just quite haven't seen that out of Michigan State. It's all, possession, work. And, Illinois can sort of be jumbled in a mess, and then they still find a way to get points. So that may be where I sort of separate Illinois a little bit. But you mentioned it, their consistency sometimes, certainly versus teams that they should dominate, they don't always dominate. And it seems like Michigan State's the opposite. Every time they play sort of somebody they can bully, they dominate that sort of thing. So really, really interesting there. I want to switch gears and go to Rutgers here, who, 2 years ago they were the darling. Last year they were still a little bit of the darling, but they started to lose a handful of games that I think we thought they'd win and they didn't win. Yeah. And that trend seems to be continuing this year. And it's sort of we mentioned it with Butler. It's a lot of the same players that they've had, the previous couple years. Home game versus Maryland. And, I think in years past, Rutgers at home has always been a huge, the last 3 years, I should say, not in past. The past 3 to 4 years has always been an easy, sweet spot. Losing at home to Maryland here. I don't know if they're going to get that late kick and make a push here. This just seems like an average team from what I've watched.
Yeah, this is, this was one of the games Tuesday night I made. I was 5-1 Tuesday. Yeah. This was my one miss. And going into those games, Rutgers was actually my favorite pick.
Yeah, we both had Rutgers at home on a short line here. Even with how much I talked to, I think Maryland sort of found their edge. I still thought going into, Piscataway here, they were going to struggle. They did not. Rutgers continues struggling.
Yeah, so they didn't let me down. They prove again that it's hard for them to consistently put points on the board. I didn't think as highly as this Maryland team as you did, so I thought Rutgers was going to come out. When I saw the 3.5 line, I was like, wow, this thing should be closer to 10 points. So I was all over that. Turns out it was the only game I missed that night. Missed out on a 14.
Should have been Maryland minus 10, I think.
Missed out on a 14 parlay with them. So Rutgers is on my no-no list for a little while because I was all over them Tuesday, and they let me down in a big way.
Don't jump on them because they beat up on Nebraska in 2 days.
So we'll see if they can bounce back, but they're really about to get into the meat of this Big Ten schedule, and I don't see them turning things around.
Yeah, I'm a little worried this team's going away. Speaking of teams I think are starting to fade away a little bit, Iowa had a big game this week versus Purdue at home late at night. I fell into the Iowa trap. I should never do that because they never defend. Somehow I think they get worse at defense every preceding year. Where is this team headed? They started out well in the non-conference. I don't think their non-conference was all that difficult, but I don't think they've been good in the Big Ten. And I'm curious if you think this team is going to make a push. I don't know if they'll not miss the tournament at 14-6. They probably have enough sort of in the bank here, but I think this team can be beat pretty much by every other top tier team in the Big Ten.
Yeah, I look at this Iowa team, and that matchup last night with Purdue, I was leaning Purdue, but you were kind of in the back of my head, and you had picked Iowa. I decided to stay away from the game. I'm glad I did, but I should have taken Purdue, but I think I was so up in the air, and Purdue's had consistency issues. But I look at this Iowa team. I think I see a at-large 10 seed. Big Ten gets a lot of respect from the committee, so I think they're going to get in the tournament. If they so much as win 60% of their remaining games, I think they're good. If they can get to that 18 to 20 win area, they're going to be right there. But that was an opportunity to really move up into that top tier. Couldn't quite do it. So we'll see what they do. They've got some tough ones coming up, especially Ohio State, I think, next week. That should be a good matchup.
Yeah, definitely so. I must say I'm a little concerned, but they always seem to be able to – they're another one that seems to be able to pick on those really poor sort of Big Ten teams and keep their record, right at least in line to qualify for the tournament. I'm just wondering if maybe one of these years that defense comes back to haunt them, and Nebraska or Northwestern sneaks up there and gets a couple of those wins on them, and then you start looking at that schedule a little side-eye, like how good are you really? You're entertaining to watch, score points out of execution, but you're basically a layup line at the other end, and I think Purdue probably set a record for uncontested layups and dunks the other night. Let's move to the Mountain West. I want to talk a little bit here about Boise State, undefeated now in the Mountain West. I thought that was a really, really tough, gritty win versus Wyoming. Coming off another tough, win there versus San Diego State, and that was coming off a win versus Utah State. So they had 2 road games: Utah State, San Diego State. That's a prime loss with a Wyoming team coming into your home court like that. They handled it. How good do you think this Boise State team is? I know they got off to a bad start early in the year. Definitely some sort of side-eye losses you'd look at. But, I mean, since about December, they've been on a run here. I think this is a really good Boise State team. It might not be the most entertaining team to watch, but I think it's a good Boise State team. And if they get the right matchup in the NCAA tournament, maybe somebody like an Iowa, I think they could grind them into a dust, where Iowa's playing a style they don't want to play.
Well, I'll tell you what, I cashed in on them in that Wyoming game. Got Wyoming was getting points. This Boise State team, they're not going to blow anybody out. They're not going to go out and win by 20. So really good to pick against them with the spread, especially if you're getting big lines. But they play some of the best defensive basketball in the country, and they continue to show that night in and night out. And I think they're good enough to keep winning in this Mountain West Conference. I think they're going to dominate throughout the rest of the year and win this conference. But they may struggle once we get into the tournament, depending on who they match up against.
I think that's the biggest thing. It's like matchup-wise.
Yeah.
And if they get another team that wants to grind, I think they could definitely sort of mess with them.
Well, you saw that in that San Diego State game last week. Just really ugly basketball game, but they play great defense. They take care of the ball incredibly well, and they force the other teams into turnovers. So if you like watching that defensive ball,
I don't think anybody likes watching that.
But just. I like them in this conference.
This is
sure.
The one they put on at 10:30 at night that
but
we've all had too much to drink and eat, and we pass out to and then wake up at midnight.
But what I love about them, I think this is a team you can make a lot of money picking their opponent with the points, because as they keep winning, the opponents are going to start getting more and more points, and I just don't think they're going to beat anybody by double digits.
Yeah. I'm going to flip things over to the other side. Basically a team almost exactly similar to Boise State here. It was a 2-game week, I will admit, but
they can't lose like that.
On the road at Utah State, I mentioned, Boise State went through that thing, grinded away a wins. That's a tough loss there for San Diego State to lose to Utah State, give up 75 points. Mm-hmm. What are your feelings here on San Diego State? I think going into the year, we probably were pretty high on this team. I thought they looked pretty decent, early on. They got a nice win over St. Mary's.
Big win over Colorado State.
But I don't know. I can forgive the Boise State loss. I thought they'd bounce back versus UNLV on Monday, but I think that's Utah State game's one they need to put in. And, there's a jumble there up at the Mountain West. I think they can probably get 3 teams.
Yeah.
I don't know if they'd extend to 4. And then you have the committee going back and looking back, and they probably see the Utah State loss. I wonder how much that comes into play. Certainly with a team like Colorado State.
Yeah. Well, it's like you said, with Boise State, Colorado State, I think those are the 2 best teams in the conference. I think those are both tournament teams. I think if San Diego State can maybe get a big win or 2, especially against, that rematch against Boise, or one of the 2 against Colorado State, I think they're going to need one of those to prove that they're also in that top tier. I think if they drop their 2 against Colorado State and the rematch against Boise, they may not have quite enough on the resume to get into the tournament.
I'm very curious to see that. Now, also conference tournament, how that plays out. And Fresno State and Wyoming both sort of knocking on that door as well. We'll see if those two teams can make a run. I just must say, really sort of disappointing game there for them in the Mountain West during the week. Granted, that's the other thing with the committee. I don't know how much they're going to, factor that in. Like, oh, you played Monday and then you played Wednesday on the road.
Yeah.
Maybe that's, a little bit of a look ahead. Let's go to the MVC, and we were singing Missouri State's praises. I must say,
hot and then very cold.
I almost took Indiana State because I looked at it and I was like, oh, this is such a dud performance coming off your big win versus Loyola. They capitulated. Dud performance there for Missouri State. Yeah. That's a really tough loss because that's not a great Indiana State team. Hard place to go, I admit, but you sort of got to win that game, and now our hopes probably lie with Drake as a two-bid league there for the MVC.
Yeah, I was looking at this one. There was a lot of cappers out there on Tuesday or earlier in the week selling Indiana State.
Yes.
Indiana State, guys, that's the upset. Missouri State's going to have this bounce back. And, you look at that upset against Loyola Chicago. Missouri State, they basically hit every shot in that game. They had a player go for 40. So I wish I jumped on that Indiana State money line as well.
I was very mad once I saw the result. I was like, you knew better.
But so you look at Missouri State, unless they're shooting 75% and have a star player going off, I don't think they're that great.
Yeah, definitely. So we'll see how they go throughout the rest of the year. But that was a tough one. A tough one I sort of saw, and am kicking myself still for not taking that plus 7.5 at Indiana State.
Speaking of games we both saw.
Yeah, UCLA, Arizona. Was this Monday night? I think we were both really, really heavy on it. I think we were both a little mad we didn't even go more heavy on it. I went even heavier than you, but I think I was mad I didn't press you and be like, this was the one to put everything on, so you have a little bit of a bankroll for the rest of the college basketball season here. UCLA just dominated Arizona. I think we both talked about it on Sunday or Monday when we did the show that it's just this is the second time Arizona's played a team that's sort of the top tier on their level, and they probably were going to get blitzed here because they just aren't used to it. They haven't seemed to hit that meat of the Pac-12 schedule yet.
Yeah, this is one, high five emoji between the two of us, because when I was going into this matchup, everyone was on Arizona. Everyone loves their style of play. They were at the top of the country in both offensive and defensive efficiency, but I just thought, what has Arizona shown me? They've played a very weak schedule going into this one. The only team they really played that was any good was at Tennessee. They lost that one, and I actually really like this UCLA team. Like you said, I wish I had put a whole lot more on it. Yeah. We both saw it coming a mile away. Really should have cashed in. And I'm looking forward to some more opportunities picking against Arizona, because until they prove me wrong and step up and play a good opponent, when they start getting into this USC, Oregon, these matchups, I'm probably going to start picking against them even more.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see if their level jumps. They're about to hit that where they play at least a handful of good teams in a row here. It's some of it's just a weird schedule, Cork, and I don't think they thought coming into the season they were gonna be this good a team. They are a really good team. They just schedule Cork where the back end of their Pac-12 schedule happened to be all the good teams. The front end happened to be all the bad ones. Speaking of disappointing, we both did a high five about Oregon, and Colorado goes up there, beats them 82-78. I think this was maybe my most disappointing loss of the week here. They seem to be riding high. You just can't lose to this Colorado team at home. Yeah. I could probably brush it off. It was a road win during the week in Colorado, but this is not really acceptable. And once again, they're 12-7. I think they'll probably win out enough games to get into the tournament. But this is one of those where you look at and are like,
Yeah, we had talked about it. I thought highly of Oregon, at least until after this game. Thought they had turned that corner, just overcame the rough start. We're climbing back, start getting back to the team we thought they were going to be at the beginning of the year. But losing this game to a mediocre Colorado team at home, I think you can kind of put them in the same boat that Iowa's in.
Yeah.
Just not quite taking care of business when they need to, and we'll see. They've got some good matchups coming up later in the season. They've got
They're about to go through an easy part of their schedule, so they should be able to pack on 3 or 4 wins. Now, granted, we were probably counting Colorado in there as one of those wins, and it ended up being a loss.
Yeah, they've got a 3-game matchup towards the end of the year: USC, UCLA, and Arizona. That's definitely their prove-it opportunity there. I still think talent-wise, this is a good basketball team. But, they dropped the ball again and let me down, and I was really disappointed because I thought they were going to come out and dominate.
Yeah, definitely so. I thought they would too. Really, really disappointing there for Oregon. All right, let's move to the other side of things here. Let's move to the SEC. Interesting game for Alabama. Basically, they beat Gonzaga, and since then they've been about the same as Georgia, and then they lose to Georgia. I think I can forgive pretty much all those losses until that one. That's just a bad one. What's going wrong here for this Alabama team? I don't even know. They have talent.
Yeah.
There are games. You saw it. I think it was a week ago. They played LSU and put it on them. I don't understand really.
Yeah, Alabama's really a head-scratcher because when you look at all the metrics, you think this is one of the best teams in the country. But they continue to drop games they should win. You look at Missouri, you look at that, that Memphis loss is looking like a bad loss now because Memphis isn't all that great. They lost the obvious one to Iona, but really this ugly one was Georgia because Georgia is probably one of the, if not the worst team in the SEC. And, I get it's a road game, but you got to take care of the bottom.
There was nobody at that game.
Yeah, no one goes to the Georgia basketball game. They're still celebrating their national championship. There was probably more people at the football stadium than there was at this basketball game. So can't lose this game.
Tom Crean's, by the way, the next one to get fired in midseason. Now, granted, this might have pushed it back another week. So, this one's a can't lose. I think,
and a really tough stretch coming up.
I think, you can sort of talk yourself into it. The Iona loss, they're going to be a tournament team. They're dominating. Yeah. I think we probably both already have our eye on upset special Iona. And by the time the tournament comes around, they might be the higher seed than they're playing, so it won't be an upset special. Memphis was a little bit head-scratching, but once again, at that point, Memphis had, pretty much all their talent. And, if you look at their talent, they got a couple guys who theoretically are going to be playing in the NBA. So you don't like the loss, but you sort of are like, okay, they shot well that day. Same with Davidson, probably will be an NCAA tournament team. You could accept it. You just have those two there, Missouri and Georgia. Those can't be losses. No. Those aren't tournament teams. Yeah. Those are really bad bottom feeder teams who have no reason to be even anywhere around there. And then you look at the defensive side of things. 92 points to Missouri, 82 points to Georgia. That can't go on. And I can't explain how you win games. Gonzaga, Houston, and then all of a sudden this stretch of losses. Basically, you've been a 500 team since beating essentially 2 of the top 5 teams in the country. Yeah. So I don't know. They got another big one coming up. We'll get into that. It'd be even more funny if they end up winning that game and have 3 wins versus the top 5 and then have Mizzou and Georgia losses on their schedule.
May have been a situation they were looking ahead a little bit because this is a big matchup against Baylor coming up this weekend.
They also have Auburn too coming up. So if they beat all essentially the top 1 seeds and then have weird losses, I'll already say now I'm assuming they'll probably get into the NCAA tournament. Oh, yeah. Things would have to go really, really bad down the stretch here with their wins. But I have no clue what I'm doing with them because, you've already seen Iona, Davidson, they can lose to those teams. So they could be a Final Four run or a first-round exit. So really, really confusing sort of one there for them. And then we'll switch gears to the other sort of confusing team in the SEC. I think it was probably 3 weeks back, maybe about 5 weeks back when I first sent you a text. I think it was they were playing Mississippi State, and I was like, I know Arkansas has some weird losses but there's a lot of potential on this team. I like the value of them getting points there versus Mississippi State. They proceeded to get routed in that game and proceeded to get routed by Vandy and Texas A&M. And I think you were looking at me side-eye, and then all of a sudden, the Mizzou game, they beat them by about 50. And since then, everything sort of clicked. And I don't know. What do you make of this Arkansas team here?
I really like this Arkansas team. I think they're playing really good basketball. They're finally, playing their brand of basketball again. They started strong, but it was an easy schedule. They kind of, slow start into the SEC schedule, but now they're playing really good. I think they could end up, it really depends on how they finish, but right now they're playing, some of the best basketball in the country. So I'm excited to see them. I think they can win against this game against West Virginia. They do have a really tough SEC schedule on the back half.
Yes.
It's definitely backloaded, but I could see them going in and getting some good wins. This is definitely, I think, right now, I think they're playing like a 4 or 5 seed team. But I put them up there in the top 4 or 5 SEC teams.
Yeah, honestly, I think out of the West, Auburn's there. I think Arkansas would be my next pick over in LSU or Alabama on that side of things. So I really like this Arkansas team. It's making me look much better now than when I told you to take them versus Miss State. They got throttled and then proceeded to lose to Vanderbilt and A&M in the preceding weeks, coming off losses to Oklahoma and Hofstra. So just a weird sort of team, but they seem to have found their flow.
Yeah.
I really like Eric Musselman as a coach, so I'm going to continue to keep my eye on this team. I was big on them last year, too. So maybe I just have a little bit of a bias, but I just like the way they play. Let's go to the Western Athletic Conference. Sort of a semi-big game. Stephen F. Austin went up there. Stephen F. Austin, Sam Houston, New Mexico State, sort of the powers that be in the Western Athletic Conference. Yes, they're not really a Western Athletic. They're sort of all over the world. But Seattle, secretly up there, was actually starting out undefeated after firing the coach. They've basically been undefeated since then. This was their first sort of true test here, and they got it done. So the Fighting Elgin Baylors here have put a run together. Do we take them serious yet? Or are we still looking at them a little bit side-eye? Because, yes, they got the win versus Stephen F. Austin, but then comes Sam Houston, then Grand Canyon, then New Mexico State. The other 3 teams, all of which you'd probably say were legit basketball teams that will make at least some sort of effort into maybe being bubble-ish to automatic bid in the NCAA tournament here. So what do we make of the Fighting Elgin Baylors?
Yeah, I was surprised. I thought I was almost took Stephen F. Austin in this pick.
I did.
Just because I didn't know if Seattle was the real deal. They took care of business. I think you can kind of hold your breath, though, until you see this New Mexico State matchup.
Yeah.
They're going to have to at least split there if they want to win this conference. New Mexico State's obviously the top dog there. But, give them credit. They're taking care of business. They surprised me again. I thought they were going to fall off, so we'll see if they can keep it rolling.
Yeah, fun to have Seattle good. It's been since the 1950s since they've really been a force in the world. So if we can get Seattle back to be a force in the world, a lot of good talent out there. I don't know if force, but I'd like to see them make a push here. I sort of would really like to see that, but we'll see how they do in this next coming weeks. They'll probably be in the games of the week for the next 2 weeks to see how they do. Let's move to the West Coast Conference. Couple things to hit on here. Big matchup, St. Mary's, San Francisco. St. Mary's pulled it out. I was a little disappointed. I wanted my Dons and the Fighting Bill Cartwrights to put some wood to St. Mary's here, but St. Mary's still looks like the sort of second team into the West Coast Conference. We'll get to BYU next after a disappointing, let's say, game Thursday night. But St. Mary's, San Francisco here. What'd you make of this game?
Well, we were kind of on both sides of the fence here. I was more St. Mary's, you were more San Francisco, which was a 2-point game. But, we kind of put them right in the same boat, looking for a little bit of to something to separate the two teams, and 2-point victory ain't going to do it a whole lot. But credit St. Mary's going in, getting the win. And but I think did you take San Francisco?
I did take San Francisco,
and they were
minus
2.5.
Yeah, it was a tough one for me to take. I think that was more a bet with my heart than my brain. But I will say both teams I thought played pretty well in the game. St. Mary's just sort of executed a little bit better down the stretch. Pretty highly efficient offense from both sides of the team. St. Mary's just made a couple more plays there. Really good second half from them. So, yeah, disappointing. I don't know what this does to the Dons' sort of tournament hopes. I thought they needed a win there. But we'll see how it goes. We'll move to BYU. I don't know if you can lose to Santa Clara on the road and still make a case for your at-large hopes. They have a couple weird losses in there. I think this is a really good basketball team with a lot of good players, but they seem to drop a couple games every. It's like every 2-week thing. Yeah. A game they should win. They sort of drop the ball there.
Yeah, and they play your San Francisco here in a game or two, and then Gonzaga. So just an ugly loss to okay Santa Clara team.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, Santa Clara is not.
Not the worst by any means.
It's not like losing to Pacific or something. Yeah. It's difficult to go into Santa Clara.
Yeah, they
and
can't go and lose to Pacific.
Yes, but it's when you sort of, if you want to maintain, sort of your tournament thing, especially in a conference that's on the lower half.
Yeah.
Even though I think there are 4 or 5 solid teams in here, you can't lose games to Santa Clara. You want to lose games to Gonzaga. You want to lose games to St. Mary's, San Francisco. You're probably okay, but you can't lose games to Santa Clara.
With BYU's schedule, they play good basketball, but there are opportunities to get good wins come few and far.
San Diego State, loss. Sort of hurts it as well.
But you can't afford to lose the games you're supposed to win, because you have to win the ones you're supposed to, because you have the ones that you're not supposed to win, there's not very many of them. So really look for them. They're going to need to run the table. Well, not run the table, but come close to running the table. I think you can afford to lose to Gonzaga, but you're going to have to go in. You're going to have to get a win at Loyola Marymount, I think, and probably take care of San Francisco at home if you really want to
definitely
move up.
San Francisco, and probably beat 1 or 2 of them in the tournament as well. You now sort of BYU probably has to make the finals of that West Coast Conference tournament. I think West Coast Conference still gets 2. I don't know if it's gonna. Gonzaga's 1 for sure, but I don't know if they can stretch 3. I was looking at it where maybe the St. Mary's gets in there as a 2, and then BYU San Francisco or BYU St. Mary's were fighting out for that 3rd spot. I don't know if they can quite make that case unless they all start beating Gonzaga, which I just don't know if that leap's going to happen. There's a tier, and then there's a
big drop.
There's a tier there. So just sort of disappointing, and we'll probably go through a little run where they win some games and then drop another one to a weird one. But yeah, just disappointing for this BYU team. All right, that's our recap of the week. Let's get into the weekend games of the week. Friday, not a huge slate. We're going to stay pretty much in the Midwest here. Couple in the MAC. The 4 best teams in the MAC are squaring off for each other. Ohio, Buffalo. Ohio coming off that loss last week to Toledo. I'm curious if they can bounce back. Tough road game here versus Buffalo. And then Akron versus Toledo. Akron, probably, I rank a little bit ahead of Buffalo here, but tough game versus Toledo. How do you see these two playing out in this one?
Yeah, I like Ohio to bounce back, and I like Toledo to take care of business. I really like this Toledo team. They may be one of my picks tonight. I took them on Wednesday, I believe, and I got a W with them. So
they're really playing well.
Yeah, so I think they're probably the best team in the conference right now. We'll see how it goes, but it's like you said, this could be 1 through 4 as far as teams in that conference, and I like the Toledo.
Fellow Toledo alum just took the Chicago Bears jump. switching on to football time. And then we go to the Cleveland State, Wright State. Wright State, difficult loss to Northern Kentucky, and I had that game, Northern Kentucky now. Northern Kentucky's 500, but I do think they'll sort of make their way up the charts here, certainly in the tournament. They're always a force to be reckoned with. But these are the two best teams right now. Cleveland State's really sort of separated themselves, I think. But what do you make of Cleveland State, Wright State? Does Wright State find a way to sort of get back on track here? Or does Cleveland State sort of continue their run?
This may be a preview into my picks for tonight. We'll see if the show gets out before Friday evening. But Cleveland State, they're on a hot streak, but they're a little lucky. They tend to not cover. They're winning a lot of close games. I think they've only covered once in their last 6. So I actually am probably going to lean Wright State tonight. I think it's about 1.5, 2 points right now in Wright State's favor. I will probably take Wright State in this matchup just because Cleveland State plays around a little bit too much and they don't take care of business as far as putting games away.
Yeah, I wanted to put this as a combo package because they have the two sort of back-to-back games, because then they play Northern Kentucky, who I think will be the other player here in the Horizon League on Sunday. So I think we'll sort of see right where Cleveland State is. I also think they've sort of been beneficial schedule-wise to sort of play in the lower tier of the Horizon so far. And we're about to see them, run through Wright State, Northern Kentucky, and Milwaukee, who hasn't been that great, but has a couple of talented kids on it. They just haven't shown up. I think one of them is having his eyes towards the NBA dream here. I think we'll find out if Cleveland State is legit and sort of if it's going to be their conference to dominate or it's going to be a Wright State, Northern Kentucky, which sort of has been the norm the last handful of years. So I'm really interested to sort of see that combo package of games there. And then lastly, we'll go out to the West, and Boise State got another one versus Fresno State. Difficult game here to go on the road versus Fresno State. I talked about it last week. Fresno State a little bit on the fringes, probably not quite in that tournament bubble competition, but I think a win at home here versus Boise State might be able to start getting them back into that conversation here. What do you make of this Boise State Fresno State game here?
Yeah, I think Boise State just plays too good of a defense here. They both struggle to put points on the board offensively, and I think Boise State's defense is going to carry them. And this is another one. I think it's at a 1.5 spread. Could go either way, but I'm leaning Boise.
Yeah, I'm interested to see if Fresno State can step up here. They sort of need a win like this. They played once before. Boise State beat them semi-easily. For Boise State, a 10-point win is really
That's a big win,
like a 20-point win, especially since they scored 65 points in that game. They aren't that kind of pace-setting team, so 65 is really like a 90 for a normal pace team. So I'll see if Fresno State can sort of bounce back. Tricky night game on the road on a Friday night. With Boise State having already played a couple times this week, so maybe they're a little bit worn down. I'm really curious to see how that game turns out. We go to Saturday. Pretty nice slate Saturday. A Big 12 SEC contest going on. I thought some of the matchups were a little dull, but you get a handful of really, really big-time showdowns, which is probably what everybody's going to see. But first one on the list I put is Duke-Louisville. I'm curious to see how this Louisville team responds. We got a leaked little thing that the AD asked the players if they were still responding to the coach, and the players were like, So I how serious I take that, I don't know. I think if you ask any player how he's responding to coach, especially when the teams are losing, it's probably always going to be So, I don't know if that question gets asked when anybody's on a 20-game winning streak to see if there's a counter answer to it. But Duke Louisville, does Louisville have anything to offer here, or does it continue down the stretch of despair?
Yeah, I haven't been a whole lot impressed with Duke. So if there's any fight left in Louisville, this would be the game to show it, and just prove to the country that they're still got some talent on that team. But I'm not sure what the spread's going to be on this one just yet. I think if it's double digits, maybe take a peek at Louisville just because Duke. I don't know if I can fully trust them yet, but Duke's a much better team here and should take care of business.
Yeah, using soccer logic, going with the new coach bounce here with Louisville. So people who do soccer will understand that logic of fire the coach. The next week you always take the team who just fired the coach because there's always a new coach bounce. I don't know if it works the same in college basketball, especially in a mid-season firing, but it would be interesting to investigate. All right, let's go to a really interesting game here.
Definitely.
I know you're high on this TCU team. LSU, TCU, pretty good matchup here for interesting sort of teams. I'm curious to see if TCU can play at this LSU level, and I'm sort of curious to see where LSU is at versus teams outside sort of the SEC that they know.
Yeah, LSU's got a little bit of the injury bug right now that's hurting them, and TCU, they got that win against Iowa State last week. They've really been impressing me, and I really like this Big 12. I think it's a really good conference, and TCU's playing really well. LSU, they were on a 3-game skid. Barely got this win the other day. So we'll see how I'm interested to see. I think TCU is going to be getting points here.
Yeah.
I'm hoping they get a lot. This could be an upset special for me.
Yeah, I'm interested to see where this line falls. I do think it probably would lean maybe 3 towards LSU, but it'll be interesting to see where it falls, especially since LSU hasn't been able to score a lot of points. So I wonder if the Automator factor that in and it ends up like a pick'em, where it's then I get a little bit more wobbly on the TCU side of things. I threw this one in because it's always a fun rivalry, but we're almost in where I just throw in Michigan into where do we sit with them, because they're in the sort of warning territory here. They haven't played great basketball pretty much all season long. Michigan State coming up. Do you put this in a must-win for Michigan, or are you still sort of like it's Michigan State, it's probably a okay bad loss? But I think the warning signs are getting there where we start to wonder if Michigan needs to do a couple things to get into the tournament here. Granted, they don't have like terrible losses, but there are a lot of losses starting to pile.
Yeah, I do think this is a must-win for Michigan, and I think the worst thing that could have happened to them was Michigan State going in and losing to that Illinois team. Yeah. I think Michigan State's going to turn it around. I think they're going to be ready for this one and get back on track, and it's not looking good for Michigan.
Yeah, they might make it in next week as we discuss Michigan. Is certainly if they lose this game, where we sit with them. Xavier Creighton. I think this is a really
both teams need to win.
Yeah, really need. You got Xavier going into a really, really tough place to play. Not a lot of people go into Creighton and win there. Both coming off sort of I wouldn't say bad losses during the week, but losses during the week. Need to get back on track. I'm really curious how this game plays out. Who do you think needs it more? How do you think this game's going to play out?
I think Creighton needs it more, just simply because I think that Providence team that just beat Xavier is a really good basketball team. I would want to take Xavier in this matchup if it was a neutral site, but it being in Creighton, like you said, makes me a little wary. We'll see what the line is, but this may be just a one where I enjoy a good basketball game because both of these teams are going to come out fighting for sure.
Yeah, I'm curious. I have a number that they're going to make Xavier favorites, and if they do, I'm grabbing Creighton on that side. I don't know if they go up over 5. I think they'd probably be too scared that a lot of people would jump on Creighton then. But I'm curious to see where this line flits out. This one probably, I do think I'd use the term must-win for West Virginia.
Definitely.
Here, because they just seem to be falling fast. This Arkansas team is on a high right now, but, I look at them probably going into the year. You'd look at these two teams and you'd say, in and around the same level of play. Arkansas seems to have the arrow pointing up. West Virginia seems to have the arrow pointing down. I just think West Virginia has to win this one. Where are you sitting on West Virginia, Arkansas on Saturday?
I really like Arkansas here. Now, recent trends could end up making the spread a little large for my taste, and I don't know.
I don't think I probably put a bet on Arkansas here just because I think this is going to be bloated.
I think if it manages to be 5 or lower, I'd probably take Arkansas, but I think this is going to be almost to the double-digit range with the way West Virginia's been playing and the way Arkansas has been playing. And I believe it's at Arkansas.
It is.
So just really like Arkansas here, but I don't quite have the confidence in them getting a double.
My question, if you got double, let's say 10.5 for West Virginia, would you be bold enough to grab?
I'd still be leaning more Arkansas there, and that's why if it's large, I'm just going to stay away.
Yeah.
Because I really don't buy into this West Virginia team, and they've really let me down, and they've been underperforming. You thought that they maybe could step up into that. They haven't, and I like this Arkansas team. They're one of my favorite teams right now, especially in the SEC. So small odds, I'd probably take Arkansas, but if it gets large, I'm just going to stay away.
All right, let's go to Indiana and Maryland. Not the most exciting matchup, but I'm just curious where this Maryland ride goes.
You may have won me over to Maryland.
Yeah, you're going to cause them to lose. But Indiana probably sits in that dead middle tier of the Big Ten, where you don't know if you trust them, but they're a pretty solid team. And, you don't know which sort of hot streak is going to come. Maryland starting to find it. Do you think Indiana goes in there, takes care of business? Do you think this Maryland team continues to roll here on this little stretch?
I think this is another opportunity for Maryland to continue their run here.
I'm on the same wavelength here on this one.
I think Indiana, you can kind of put them maybe a little ahead of Michigan.
Yeah.
They're kind of in that who knows area right now. But Maryland, they've been proving it lately. And being at home, I think they may be able to keep that momentum going.
Yeah, I think you put them in the if they were in the NCAA tournament and they played Iona and lost, you wouldn't be stunned. But if they played like Texas and won, you also wouldn't be stunned. So it's in that tier of a range of many chances of outcomes on that one. I'm just curious to see if Maryland can make a push here to sort of get into the tournament. All right, let's move on to our next one. I talked about it a little bit. Temple goes to SMU. You got Houston, then it'll drop off to SMU, and then you got probably a nice little, maybe not Grand Canyon gap, but the Rio Grande sort of gap to the next tier of teams. I think Temple's probably that top tier of the next tier of teams. How much do you need to see from Temple here going into SMU? What's your trust level into this SMU team? They've been a pretty consistent sort of, mid-level seed tournament team the last handful of years. So what's your feeling on Temple SMU here?
I think Temple's got more to prove in this game. Now it will be a struggle going on the road, but I do think they're a slightly better team, and they may, if they come in with that chip on their shoulder, maybe they can come in and surprise some people. But they're going to need to narrow that gap and get up there in the Houston range.
I will say I'm not quite as bullish on Temple this weekend as I was during the week on the Cincinnati game. I definitely trust them a lot more at home and sort of in that range to beat up on all those middle tier teams than the sort of two upper echelon teams in that conference. Big one in the Big South. Winthrop Longwood. I've been
big on this one.
Yes, I've been waiting for this one for a while. Now, Winthrop had a little bit of a letdown losing in the 2-game week, but then they bounced back and won a tough game versus Kennesaw. So, back on track. I am really interested more to see how Longwood goes here. Winthrop's been sort of the dominant team in the Big South for a long, long time. They're the big bugaboo. Then you got Jacksonville State hovering right around there. But this Longwood team really looks good. Undefeated in conference so far. This is the biggest step up they've had to see if they're really legit here. What are your feelings, Winthrop Longwood? Do I need to get you the Longwood hoodie?
Well, everything tells me Winthrop, except for you. You're telling me Longwood. You're telling me they're this great team. They're going to be the Cinderella story this year. So I don't know if I'll make a pick on this game. We'll see what the odds are, but this is a wait and see for me, I think.
Yeah, I will say I'm probably getting a little scared here. I'm curious what the odds makers do here because lazy odds makers probably make Winthrop about a 2-3 point favorite because they don't know any better. But like if I'm looking at the line, I'm probably like 3 on Longwood here. So I'm curious where they sit. If they just go the lazy way, knowing everybody sort of looks at this game, sees Winthrop Longwood, everybody is just assumes Winthrop, who at least follows college basketball. Most of the other sort of halftime bettors just sort of scan through and don't pay attention. But I'm just curious where this line sits. But I will say I'm not as aggressive on Longwood quite yet. I want to see what they do versus this Winthrop team, who's still a very, very good team. Maybe not the best team in the Big South this year, but still, if they make their run through the tournament and win it, not going to shock me all that much. But nonetheless, very excited about the Big South. This is the game I will be watching. Next up, Baylor, Alabama. This will probably be the game you will be watching. Alabama, the Dragon Slayer so far this year, but have not been able to beat the little teams. We already talked about them a little bit. Curious how you think this game's going to play out. Does Baylor just sort of suffocate them into submission, or does Alabama step up? They've shown a tendency to step up in the big games. Does it continue here, or do we get Judge Georgia?
I would normally say I think Bama steps up here, but I really like this Baylor team. Yeah. I think this Baylor team could be they're on the road for back-to-back, I think. So they're the best team in the country, in my opinion. But it's going to be a hard one for me to make a pick on. I'm interested to see what the line is. Bama being at home, maybe that comes down enough to where I'm tempted to take Baylor. I could see Baylor going into this 4.5, 5-point favorites. If it creeps down in that area, I may lean that, but should be a great game of basketball.
Yeah. Baylor's one of these teams where I think it's like least likely to be upset, just because to actually beat them, you probably have to have one of those just random shooting days where you're hitting everything, even if they're playing good defense. A couple shots get thrown up there, they go in. That being said, that's sort of been Alabama's style. So, if they're having one of those days where they're hitting, a lot of difficult shots, maybe it's in there. But I just trust this Baylor team too much. I think sort of Alabama's lost its way. I think Baylor goes in there and probably crushes them. So I'll be interested to see where this line sits. If they make it more down to your side, or they're too scared to give anything like under, 6-7 and really sort of push Baylor up there. So nobody's just going to hop on there and jump on them, or jump on them on the money line.
Yeah.
Maybe they do a little offset, lower that spread, but, push the money line a little higher than it probably should be to where the line sits. So a really interesting one. Then we go to Conference USA. North Texas, Louisiana Tech. Keep your eye on this North Texas team. Pretty good basketball team here. Louisiana Tech bounced back this week.
Yep.
Got a pretty good win. I'm really interested to see if this North Texas team could go into Louisiana Tech and win. You mentioned UAB. They're the other class of Conference USA here. Let you down a little bit the other day. But I want to see if this North Texas team puts themselves into the player category. Louisiana Tech, North Texas, UAB. Teams really in Conference USA. I don't know if this is a two-bid league. They don't have a lot of teams with sort of trendy names, and the ones who are good this year aren't trendy names. I think UAB has enough of a name that they would get in. I don't know if they'd be willing to at-large bid a Louisiana Tech or a North Texas. So I think this is really, really sort of important game for one of these teams to separate themselves, to at least get a look at by the committee.
Yeah, I don't think North Texas is going to go into Louisiana Tech. It's a tough place to go into and get a win. They've, always in this conference been at or near the top. And so I just, like you said, North Texas, they're on a really good win streak. We'll see how it goes. But I think I'm leaning Louisiana Tech here.
Yeah, I really want them to go in there and get this win, but I think it'll be too difficult to go in there and beat a really good Louisiana Tech team who actually just might be better. Really close game, though, overall. Really excited to watch that one as well. Next up on the slate, we go to the WAC. And Sam Houston, granted, middle of the state, lower southern Texas, but hey, whatever. Sam Houston goes to Seattle. We talked about Seattle a little bit before. Sam Houston, second in the conference to New Mexico State with Seattle. really had a good run here. How do you think this game is going? Does Seattle win sort of back-to-back? Granted, they have not left their home base in Seattle, and it is a difficult road. Things Stephen have Austin proven to go up to the other end of the country here. But how do you think Seattle handles probably their second test here?
I think Seattle's going to keep it rolling. I think, you kind of pointed them out to me this last week. They took care of business. I think they're going to beat the Sam Houston State. I'm interested to see what the spread is, but I think Seattle's proven it a little bit more. So
yeah,
that's who I'm going to ride.
I think I will probably ride Seattle again. I think I'm going to wait and hope that line gets really, really low versus, say, a Grand Canyon or a New Mexico State when they go on the road and they have to leave their little palace up in Seattle and they have to make the other end of the road trip going down into the valleys and into the mountains of those states. So I'm sort of half pulling for my own self that Seattle gets this win, and then I can take advantage of one of those lopsided spreads when Seattle goes on the road versus Grand Canyon or New Mexico State. Yeah. I don't know if they get a low spread versus New Mexico State. They've been bullying everybody. But I do have an eye on when they go into Grand Canyon University. Yes, it's not just a online school. Functional, Rails College, right outside of Phoenix. I've seen it. I've played basketball at their gym. So it's an actual school that actually has a pretty decent basketball program. So, all right, let's move on to the OVC. And there are some teams hitting here. 3 really, really good teams in the OVC. I'm kind of hoping this is a 2-bid league. I don't know if they will do it. They've done it a couple times. This Murray State team's really, really good. Yeah. Morehead State has put on some really good performances. And, of course, you have Belmont, who's consistently good every year. Morehead State versus Murray State playing here this weekend. Another good one to watch. Can Morehead State go into Missouri State, who I think's probably maybe a little bit separated from, the Belmont Morehead State type of team, but Morehead State, Murray State. Can Morehead go in there, sneak a win?
I don't think so. I think if the point spread's large enough, maybe they can get a cover, but I don't think they're going to win against this Murray State team. I think they run this conference.
Yeah, I think so. But if there is going to be a 2-bid league, this would be a win that a Morehead State or a Belmont would have to have. Belmont already failed going into Missouri State, got beat up pretty good. So Morehead will have to go in there, get that win to at least have a sort of signature name on their schedule here. Kentucky, Kansas, probably the biggest game of the weekend. The Blue Bloods match up here. Kentucky goes to Kansas. How do you think this one's going to play out here? Big physical Kansas team, big physical Kentucky team. Yeah. Sort of an old school clash. We might not have 453s going up in a game here.
Well, I'm a big fan of this Kentucky team. We both know about all the big men on Kansas and Kentucky. You've got Sheboy, the big shot rebounder at Kentucky, but I think this really comes down to Kentucky's guard play. I watched this game with Kentucky against Auburn. I thought Kentucky was the better team, and as soon as Ty Washington went down, Kentucky just couldn't handle on the offensive side of the court. Those guards that had to step up were just turning the ball over, couldn't get their offensive rhythm going. Now, there's rumors that Ty Washington will play in this game. I don't know how healthy he'll be with that rolled ankle, but if he's full go, I like Kentucky here. If not, look for Kansas to get the win.
Yeah, definitely so. All right, moving back to the Big South. Big weekend for the Big South Conference. The other side of it, Jacksonville State, Liberty, the other 2 really good teams in here match up. So 2 great matchups out of the Big South this weekend. Winthrop Longwood, Jacksonville State, Liberty here. Liberty has a slight advantage in this conference because it's a school with just a ton of money, where these other ones are sort of small tier state schools or private schools without huge funds. But is Liberty just going to run away with this win, or is this Jacksonville State team going to pressure them? Because I've watched this Liberty team like twice. It's not been as good as the last couple of years. It's a little bit like the football team, but I don't know if Jacksonville State, who's been really good, quite has enough to match up here with Liberty.
Yeah, I think Liberty's kind of got the just experience here that's going to get them through, especially being at home. I think they come out with the win.
Yeah, I think they do sort of come out with the win. I will say every time they sort of played a team we put in or around a tournament bubble or sort of maybe right off the tournament bubble, they haven't been able to win. They lost to Iona. They lost to a Manhattan team who's not been great, but probably okay. They lost to LSU. They played Stephen F. Austin, who, we already talked about as, sort of right in that grouping of top teams in the WAC. They couldn't win that one. And Stanford and BYU, they're there, but they never seem to come out with a win. And Jacksonville State, who has played really good basketball, especially in conference, but they haven't really played any of the top teams until this week, where they beat Bellarmine and Kennesaw State. Has been pretty good, but once again, every time they stepped up in competition, they've lost as well. So I'm just curious to see which one of these teams takes control and which one teams of the other two take control as sort of your ones you're looking at in the Big South, because I think any of these four teams are ones that I look at that may be able to spring an upset in the NCAA tournament, where they have at least enough class and quality of player if they get the right matchup to be able to beat one of those sort of middle tier teams in the other conferences that'll get a 6, 7, 8 type seed. So really interested for those matchups. We'll get back into the Big 12 SEC. Rick Barnes goes back to Texas. Tennessee, Texas. Is this another one you're looking for where Tennessee needs to get the win? Or is this one where Texas sort of needs to get a win over a big-time team too? They got a little bit of that earlier this week, but I think sort of both these teams sort of are in the same sort of place where they're good, but I don't know if we trust them to really sort of play with that top tier there.
Yeah, this is going to be a great basketball game because both of these teams are looking to prove that they belong in the upper echelon of NCAA. Tennessee struggles offensively. They've struggled on the road. I think they've only got 1 or 2 true road wins this season. But the last couple weeks, they've ever since that LSU matchup, they've picked up a little bit of a swagger. They're playing with a little bit of edge. They're getting in people's faces, technical fouls left and right. It'll be interesting to see how much of an attitude they come in going to a home where Barnes was for a while. I don't know if the history will have too much to play in this, but
other than they apologize for firing him because they haven't been good since they fired him.
The thing is
granted, we're about to do the same thing in probably 1 or 2 years. So.
I don't think I can trust either of these teams really. So I'm probably gonna sit back, enjoy this game, root for my Vols. Oddsmakers, I don't know where they're going to put this.
Well, I think that's some interesting thing because I think both these teams have been a little overvalued. And their spreads have been a little bloated all season long. So I'm wondering which one they're going to bloat to.
I think this could end up being between like a 1 and 3 point spread in either direction. I could see it going either way. They may give Texas the edge with it being at home. But, Tennessee, Ken Palm, and defensively, they're high up there. So they're still well thought of, even though they can go on droughts where they go 5-10 minutes without even scoring.
I think you could say the same for Texas as well.
So it'll be interesting to see which one steps up. I think they both have a lot to prove. So they're both going to be after this. So it should be a great basketball game.
This really might be one of those games where Tennessee gets a 4, Texas gets a 5, and they are decided by this game right here. Who gets, a little bit higher of a line and avoids maybe a Winthrop or a Longwood and has a tough game in that first round, and who has an easy game in that first round. We'll move to Sunday. Not a huge slate of games, but a couple in here that might be decent. Ohio State, Purdue. I'm a little interested in this one. I don't think Ohio State gets talked about a whole lot. They sort of just maintained a sort of steady, a lot of hype goes on Illinois, a lot of hype goes on Michigan State. I don't know if, Ohio State, I think they're just as good as those teams. So they sort of don't get, talked about as much. But I'm curious to see if they can go in Purdue and play with them here. I probably lean towards Purdue, but I got my eye to see how Ohio State handles this type of game here.
I still don't trust Purdue. just because they can just have an off night and really underperform.
They're like a better version of Iowa, I think.
But Ohio State, I've seen them go cold offensively. Yes. If they're not hitting their threes, they struggle to put the points on the board, whereas Purdue's a little bit more consistent with the inside game. So should be a great game. Definitely get some separation in the Big Ten rankings. Not sure which way I'm leaning yet. We'll see what the spread looks like.
Yeah, definitely so. Big one in the Big East here.
I'm excited about
Marquette, Providence. Marquette's probably been the hottest team in the Big East the last couple of weeks. Providence coming off that big win versus Xavier, and probably has been the best, most consistent team in the Big East. This is a huge class. What way are you leaning here? Can Providence sort of get their game going, or can Marquette sort of just overwhelm them with their sort of 40 minutes of hell type version basketball?
Well, I think over the season, Providence has proven to be the better team, but Marquette is really hot. Yeah. So I think Providence is going to end up being the favorite here, especially being at home. But I think if Marquette ends up getting more than 5, I'd probably lean towards taking Marquette.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see where this line comes in.
Yeah.
Because I think Providence has been a little undervalued all season long, and I don't think they've sort of known what to do with Marquette all season long.
I think you could see a bit of an overreaction with the way Providence dominated Xavier. Yeah. So it may be a good opportunity to get a lot of
They
points.
might finally adjust towards Providence here. Yeah. But I think I've been saying that like 4 weeks, and they still haven't done it. Next up, this isn't a huge matchup, but St. Peter's is the second best team in this conference. But I think there's a pretty big gap here. Honestly, I think this line will probably be 9-10. So you're looking at second best team versus first best team, and the spread's probably almost in double digits. But St. Peter's plays Iona. Any chance St. Peter's goes in here, springs an upset, or is Iona just on a totally different level? These are really, really small schools here.
Well, I'm going to be honest. I haven't watched a whole lot of St. Peter's.
So I don't think a lot of people have.
But I do know a good bit about Iona, and I know they're a good basketball team. So I'd have to stick with Iona here.
Yeah, I think St. Peter's. If Iona wasn't in there, it'd be a fun sort of matchup. But it's sort of like Iona is on a totally different level. The Metro Athletic Conference is just a really, really tiny conference. They don't spring a lot of, tournament upsets, though Iona might. They have a little bit of an advantage. Rick Pitino's the coach there. He's pulling in some, decent recruits that are on a much higher level than what this has. But I thought I'd mention it just because, you got a 1 versus 2 in your conference. You at least sort of talk about it, even if it is sort of a lopsided one. See if St. Peter's can make a little bit of a game of it. Lastly, we go to the Missouri Valley. Can Drake? We got it last week where Missouri State went in, shot above their head a little bit and came back crashing down to earth. Loyola Chicago had a pretty tough week. They had,
definitely.
Missouri State over the weekend, then had to play Southern Illinois, then go to play Southern Illinois, now has to play Drake on Sunday. So that's about 4 games in about a 7-day stretch here. 3 of them on the road. Can Drake spring an upset here? They're probably right in and around where Missouri State is, I'd say, team-wise. So it will be difficult to go up there. But I just think Loyola Chicago probably got their one sort of loss out of the way here. But maybe Drake can go in there and sneak a win here.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think Loyola Chicago, and they didn't play terrible in that Missouri State loss. Just Missouri State shot lights out. So I like Loyola Chicago here.
Yeah, I think so. All right, so that's our weekend best games of the week. That's our show. We'll be back on Monday to preview the next week's game, review what went down over the weekend, especially in that Big 12 SEC showdown, a couple of the big matchups in the other conference, and see how they sort of work their way out. We'll be back on Monday. That's our show. And Brown.
There's the pass to Leitner. Puts it on.